Alrighty. Well, I had hoped that you would enjoy a little snippet of my music, but it's not cooperating. It's Leid Stories. I'm Utrice Leid, and we're picking up from where we left off with each other just Friday. And a whole lot has happened between then and now. Recent social, political, and economic developments in the United States might encourage some to think we're witnessing something of a rebirth of the people-powered, people-centered civil rights mass movements of the 1960s. But looking objectively at the situation, we can see how oversimplified such a conclusion would be. Some of you may disagree with my point of view, and that's great. As long as you can tell me something different and better, I'm all ears. Are we in fact moving forward, or are we still in reaction mode? Are we still waiting to see what they will do to us before we figure out what to do for ourselves? This is the eternal conundrum that we have faced in this country, as people of color in this country. Except that in the time we're in right now, we do have an opportunity, even with all the horrible news, all these developments that are telling us essentially how this system is getting ready to prepare itself to create a new level of indifference. They will grab onto those things that would, grab headlines and that would excite people into thinking, all right, well, they heard us. They're not hearing you. And you have to understand that. They're not hearing you. The system has come to at least appreciate, they can't not appreciate it, that they are between a rock and a hard place. Too many things are happening at the same time, and they don't have a solid hold of most any of it. So they will keep us entertained with, they'll throw you a surplus, something going on. I don't get what's going on. Okay, are we okay? Or is something going on?
I'm hearing all good.
Kinds. I'm sorry?
There was a glitch in the connection, but you're fine now.
Okay. All right. We're troopers. We keep moving. Goofing. I just was told there was a glitch, but I like the fact that it is past tense, was. So we will keep moving. We are being, they're giving us a palliative or two. Give you a check for $1,200. That should keep you quiet for a while, because it's down payment for what's to come. And they're hoping that between now and whatever it is to come, we'll be quiet and we'll trust that they've changed their ways, and we should believe exactly what they say and all the. I'm tired of all of that. I'm too old to be falling for these things. We need to understand where we are, and not with respect to how it plays on the large stage. I'm not interested in placating people. I'm interested in how we are taking care of business or not taking care of business for ourselves. They have a whole range of things that they can do in their interests, which will frustrate our interests. And they're prepared to do it. The work, it seems to me, is to bring everything in. Bring everything in. And let's sort it out. Let's figure out exactly where we are. How are we going to survive? What is happening to us? What are our defense systems? We have none. And we keep signing up for their defense systems. They can't help us. We have to retreat. We have to come back to ourselves and do the real work. The real work is in reconstruction, rebuilding our communities and ourselves. We have, with all of this going on, and we talking as if we are on par with these people. They control the system. They control systems, period. Where are our systems? And why aren't we spending time constructing those? Because they are, in the end, going to save us. They're probably the only thing that could save us now. I've been saying this for years. But people got excited with whether Bill Clinton is going to get elected or Hillary is going to get elected and Obama. They're getting all these distractions. And nobody is paying attention to the essential work here. What about our communities? What about us? I mean, the essential us. And we see decade after decade going by, and those people are getting exactly what they want. No matter how terrible the times are, no matter how challenging, they are doing well. They're thriving. They're prospering. They're getting their needs met. They're executing their plan, and it's working. And we come into that as well, because we get them elected. We keep them in office. We are the people they point to and say, see, I'm good for the Black people, which is why you should keep me in office. And we are so thrilled. We are so thrilled that we elected somebody who couldn't give a hang about what is important to us. Worse, neither do we. In the intervening time, our communities erode, they disappear, they fall apart. And we're still clinging to this silly idea that the Democrats, they will save us. They'll throw us some pretty meaty bones and we'd be all right. But you look at the reality and ask yourself, well, what did we get? The answer is more of the same. We don't raise a fuss. We don't call them to account. We don't publicly denounce them. We just keep hoping that, well, the next time around, maybe we get a better person. No, we have to become ruthless and obsessive about our interests. Two words I have always used in our professional discussions. These are the things I say we have to do. We have to be ruthless and obsessive about our interests, period. We are out of time. While they're still trying to patch things up and fix things up so that they can continue, because the Democrats and the Republicans agree on one thing: they are in charge. They own the apparatus. We don't. Whether we support them or don't support them, we are not part of the formula of control. We are controlled. It's a very, very, very bad habit, but we have to break it. And this is a good time to do so. Break the habit of being dependent on people who care nothing about you. You are a convenience. Your whole history is a convenience. And we are thinking, well, hopefully they will come to their senses and they will act like real human beings. And we keep hoping and praying, and we keep getting more of the same. And somehow we convince ourselves that it's different this time around. Really? We have to fish or cut bait, my friends. And after this time, we shouldn't have this conversation again. We can't afford it. We have almost totally run out of time to reclaim ourselves, our very lives. We've almost completely out of time. We own nothing. We control nothing. We legislate nothing. We are only kidding ourselves. That's how we matter in the scheme of things. The only thing that they are worried about is, please don't break any more beer bottles in the street. Please don't knock out the windows of my Lamborghini. And we could figure a way out. We could talk to each other. But, There's no room for people like us. They saw to it. And we are so unthinking, we still think that we are part of the United States. Wake up and smell the bustelo. We are almost completely out of time to fix what ails us. And I'm being very particular, very specific, because if we don't think this way, we will not survive at all as a group. It is not so much that you have to change this rule and that law and the other attitude. No, that's not what needs to be fixed here. We, no matter how much people pretend that they're at least 4 steps away or 5 steps away from utter disaster, so they have at least 5 steps to go, you have no steps left. That's what I want people to understand. You're out of space to make changes that you need. You're done. They are proceeding with their program, and it's working very efficiently to achieve all of the main goals that they have set. Democrats, Republicans, it does not matter. It doesn't matter. It is irrelevant, and we should make it irrelevant to our task. It's irrelevant to our task. If we can't see the writing on the wall, then we actually deserve what we are going to be getting. If now, even now, we can't see it, we have no hope. There's no reason to pretend that we are part of a big structure that believes in freedom and equality and all the other nonsense people preach. It does not exist. The only thing that could exist is that we become very real about where we are and what we are experiencing and what is planned for us. As a people, what is planned is that you don't exist. And if you do exist, you are merely marginal. You're marginal at best. But we keep falling for the okie doke all the time. We keep thinking we have been integrated in the society. I mean, how thick-headed do we have to be? We believe this is a democratic society. We still believe this stuff. And there's equal education for all, equal health care for all, equal housing for all. You have a good job. that would allow you to feed your family and to help those who cannot help themselves. All of this is hogwash. It is not happening. It hasn't been happening for a long time. And I once again bring our attention to the fact, excuse me, that we got to get real. If not now, then never. If we can't get real now about what we must do, then we'll never get it. Normally, I am very optimistic, but I also am realistic. Our community has been worn down, almost to the point of being worn out. And we're doing very little to structurally fix it. When I say structurally, that's what I mean. Not a patch job, not asking to be included a couple $1 million more in the budget. That is not what will save us. We have to articulate our survival ourselves. We have to see to it that it is a number one priority, if with no one else, then with us. If no one else thinks it's a major problem, a major issue, and on top of that, we also think it's not a major issue, then the whole thing is lost. Why don't we all just jump into the sea? Protests are good. They drive a point home. That's fine. What is our structure to be? How do we reclaim ourselves, reclaim our battered communities? How do we fix it? So that, and this is going to sound very awkward, here we are in modern times, and so far behind our forebears who didn't have 1/10 of what we have, and who suffered 10 times as much as we are suffering today, and still had intact communities, and cared for each other, and fostered educational systems directed at their children and grandchildren. And created their own jobs and grew their own food. And some of them could barely read or write. But they read the messages loudly and clearly. And they gave us several templates, not just one. This is how you could feed yourself. This is how you can clothe yourself. This is how you could provide your own employment. This is how you can build your own houses right there in Brooklyn, in Crown Heights. Was the first self-running Black community in the state of New York. They didn't ask anybody for anything. They raised their own crops. They built their own houses. The school that they built is still there, going down toward Flatbush. They didn't ask anybody for a job. But we don't know how to do that. Suddenly we are acting as if we had no templates at all. We had no experience in self-governance. We don't know how to take care of ourselves and survive. We want to be part of the system which does not know what it's doing. Now, if this were a system that could aptly demonstrate superior skill and capability of running a society, I might be inclined to say, well, wait a minute, let's study what they have. But they're in bad shape. They're mediocre. And I'm being kind. What they have is power over everyone else. And that power is used repeatedly to keep that group in charge and doing well, and everybody else could go to hell as far as they're concerned. So, are we going to get serious? This is the question I've been asking. Demonstrations are good. They're necessary, in fact. But we have to have a plan, or several plans. And it can't be all about integrating ourselves into a system so destructive. We don't want that. Show us how we can improve ourselves. Guarantee that we could make our living ourselves. We can educate our children ourselves. We can provide our own jobs. Now we're talking. Now I'm ready to listen. I have no interest in listening to people preaching about how we can integrate ourselves into a very useless system. Useless in the sense that there's no way. No matter how deeply you burrow yourself into it, it is not yours. It's not for you. We must save our communities. It's our only salvation. Reclaim our communities, save our communities. Because that's the only thing that in turn will save us. Okay, so I'll stop here for a minute and let you get in on the conversation at 888-874-4888. We'll be back with each other right after this break. Leid, and we're talking about the fact that we have to, in the middle of all of what's happening, we have to find a space. We have to make a space for ourselves to do some thinking, to slow down and think. Because whatever we commit to doing next will either save us or destroy us. we're out of time, almost totally out of time to recoup. And that for us is a major reality. We can't assume that what is happening for everybody else is we're similarly situated. We are not. We are in great distress. And don't kid yourself about it. So what is it that we should do and must do to save ourselves and our community? Ma'at, you're on the air.
Yes, greetings to the beloved community.
Thank you.
It's quite something to look at. It's true, and the question, of course, is what do we do and where we go from there. I also think about hearing about a conversation that the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had, in that he said we may be integrating into a burning house. And the person, and I didn't know this part of it, said, well, what do we have to do in light of that? And the answer was, be firemen. So that's an interesting aspect of the question. One of the main things that we're in such a pickle is that there's example after example of how we are not connected as a community. So the so-called leaders have their fiefdoms. If you're not part of the inner circle, anything could happen to you and toward you. Okay, I won't go into.
But talk to us about what you think can be done. Let's ignore for the moment all the other stuff. Let's figure out on what is possible.
That's why I was kind of intrigued when I heard this professor, and he was kind of creepy. F.H. Buckley had this book on Washington Journal/Book TV played, and it was called Secession. And I was somewhat intrigued. I think I brought this up once before. I was somewhat intrigued to hear that there are certain, and I'm not familiar with the details or particulars, but there are active movements or in certain parts of the country that want to succeed. And his thesis was something to the effect, well, this would avoid a civil war, which I thought was interesting because...
people talking about secession, without understanding what secession is.
Right,
you have to have an army. You have to have militia. You have to be prepared. You have to have a system, a parallel system that could feed people, educate people, take care of. You have to have a whole thing. So when people talk very casually about secession, it should frighten you and should make you run real fast. Put on some sneakers and run away, because they haven't thought about
the overall ideological idea is interesting, particularly since I noticed in California there was some move, but you're right, and it is fantastical, but it might start a discussion in terms of where we need to go. Now, I do think that there is an inflection point where we are right now, so I see that there is some opportunities, but the fact that we don't connect very much as a community is crucial. Coming up, I want to be able to leave my email and phone number and see if I, for what we're doing on an individual level, if we could kind of come together and see if, go take it beyond the discussion.
I understand and appreciate it, but I have an entirely different mindset right now. If you're not ready to go, don't put anything out there. Put something out there. When you're ready, you have something that is workable right now. because what if not, we'll gather to talk. More talk, more talk.
You say more talk.
Yeah, we don't need it. But your idea is very, very worthwhile considering. Thank you so much for calling in today. Paul from Maryland, you're on the air.
Yes, hi. Good afternoon, Utrice. I just wanted to, hi. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I totally agree with what you're saying. However, I noticed that this presents somewhat of a conundrum. You know, statistically and economically, you know, Black people in America are at the absolute bottom. You know, in terms of what our wealth level is compared to that of the dominant society. Yet at the same time, we are also owed a great debt from what has been taken from us, everything from slavery to Jim Crow to redlining, et cetera. So while we do try to do for self and build for ourselves, which is something that we absolutely have to do, and for which I totally agree, we're also building from a point of disadvantage. We're not really going to be able to compete, let's say, you know, with the Amazons and the other large corporations.
But Paul,
so
if you don't mind me saying so, you are anticipating the problem before we even start. Let's find out what you're thinking. And let's get people thinking. You know, I'm a big believer in thinking.
Me too. And I totally agree with you. It's just that I think that if that were the only piece of the puzzle, I think we would have done it already. Just like how you were talking about that
because
area
you know
of
what?
Brooklyn.
We have become complacent and we have become dependent on a system that means us no good. We absolutely refuse to believe that this system means us no good. We don't believe it.
Well, that's true. That is true, and I do believe that. It's just that, you know, I see a lot of efforts of people talking about, you know, building and buying their own, you know, like building and buying black and keeping everything insular and putting our gate up. I see that all the time, and I actually see people taking action doing that. Although it seems to be more like it's in pockets and it's also incidental. I just think that that's not the entire piece of the puzzle. Not that we shouldn't do that. I don't think it's either or. I think it's both and. I just don't see where we can do it thoroughly with the little that we have without getting what we are owed.
First of all, we don't have little. We have a lot. We have not done a proper inventory. But we have a lot. In human skills, in actual money, we have a lot. Listen, I was reading yesterday about the richest pastors in the United States. Almost all of them that I read about were African American. So we have a lot. Not just here, we have a lot outside of the United States. We haven't done the right kind of inventory and we haven't done the right kind of thinking. I'm saying we are so low on time. We have to get to those things that we can implement immediately without having to go through, you know, all those permutations, but ideas that sound very good and can be implemented right away. We don't need to study whether a farmer's market is a good idea.
Oh, I totally agree. Just like I don't believe in this legislation that's trying to get us to study the case for reparations. I think that there are already plenty of studies out there and plenty of evidence pointing to the actual need for it. Because after all, you know, it's not a favor, it's not a gift. Reparations is actually a debt. But just to briefly touch on something else that you were saying, you had mentioned about these pastors. Well, that's true. Most of black wealth is actually concentrated among baby boomers, but it's the younger generations that don't have any. And I don't think, and like in all fairness, I don't believe that we really need to be looking at pastors or even celebrities or athletes or Oprahs.
No, I
Because
cited to say
small speck
that
of
we,
what we
we
truly have.
fail all the time to recognize the wealth that we have in our communities now. That's why I cited it. We have that wealth available to us now. You know, this entire economy would collapse if Black people stopped spending.
I agree. Well, how do we?
Okay,
How do we make that happen? How do we really connect
it's a
that
long conversation. We can't
logistically?
start it now, but it talks about it has to do with a consciousness and a purpose and proper direction.
It does.
And we have to get out of this idea that we cannot survive without the system.
I agree. I totally agree.
All right.
Well, thank you very much.
That puts a nice end to my day that we agree. Thank you, Paul, for calling in.
All right, certainly.
Ashby from Westchester, you're on the air.
Hello. Hello. Me?
Hello?
Hello.
Ashby, yes, you're on the air.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. Hello. How are you doing today? I'm getting very frustrated. I have to agree with you 1,000%. You've laid it out, and if we old farts don't get the message, we'll never get the message. We are a people too eager to be joining the group. We don't need to be in anybody's group but our own. And I am tired of hearing too many of the people calling in, and they are beating all around the bush and not wanting to pick up your message. I'm glad you're optimistic because I'm not. I just have no faith in all of this crap that's going on.
Don't say that. Don't say that. Don't say that.
Pardon me?
But you said you're not optimistic, and I was saying, don't say that. Don't say that.
No, I mean in terms of, trying to have faith in something that, I've seen for a long time not working. Of course, I've experienced living in an all-black area. I grew up like that. And I could say my area was almost like a little Tulsa. And I see what we are capable of doing, but we just don't have the mindset. For some reason or other, too many of our people drinking the Kool-Aid. They're feeling that they are a part of what you say is the system, and they're pushing to get into the system that we're not even written in it. We're being used by it. Too many black folks are waiting for Jesus to come. That's all I have to say. But I agree with you wholeheartedly, and that's my whole program. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for contributing today.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for calling in. Bill from Brooklyn, you're on the air.
Good afternoon, Yatrice, and to all your audience. First of all, I'll get right to it. You're welcome. And the thing is that black people, we really have to take control of our communities and come together in some way to establish what I will term, and it'll sound very radical, but a new militancy. I don't mean violence, but I mean a serious attitude of communal.
I understand exactly what you say.
Yes, and so just now, there's thousands and thousands of people all over this country who are protesting, and like you said last week, you won't see one person out there registering people to vote. Not that voting is the answer, but community is the answer, and it has to be some organization. The thing is, however, when black people and browns and poor whites start to organize, then this thing called the system, this machine called the system, steps in to quell that. And I just saw something that I found out recently that the government has been planning. They've had plans for over since 1960s regarding these types of demonstration. Right now, it takes just the stroke of a pen of the president to institute basically martial law, where the army will come out into the communities, and there's a program that the Defense Department has called Project Garden Plot, and that's been in effect since the 1960s. People can Google it, And some of the indicators for that going into effect, and I'm reading, it says high unemployment rate among minority groups, increased crime rates among minority groups, protests arising from income disparities between minority and majority groups, declining rapport between local officials and minority groups, migration of large numbers of minority groups, and protests by minority groups to such conditions as slum conditions, segregation in housing and schools, lack of jobs, lack of recreational facilities, police brutality, and local overpricing practices. So the government is ready. They're ready. We are in the crosshairs.
But we should always think of this when you talk about minority groups.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if all these minority groups were to come together?
Well, just on Saturday, we had the celebration of the revolutionary Che Guevara. And so what happens is you have a revolution. And that's what people really can't get.
What I was suggesting was this concept of minority and majority.
Yeah.
What is that?
It's
a minority? Really?
It's a fiction.
They were a minority.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. At this second.
Okay, so that's all we need to remember. That should dissipate a lot of fear. Don't call me a minority. Look up your own history and see. You've been a minority for a long, long time.
That is the very truth. And just like in South Africa and in places like, unfortunately, in the Middle East, you have groups that intend on subjecting the majority groups to a permanent class of being dominated and lacking of the basic needs to exist. And we are, as Black people, now in that situation right here, unfortunately. But it's going to take a radical.
We have to persevere. We have to develop a brand new attitude, a militant attitude. Militant meaning that I refuse to accept second-class citizenship anymore.
Absolutely.
It's just not going to happen.
But
thank you so much for calling in.
Yes, thank you.
Sasha, you will be our last caller today. Thank you from LA for calling in.
Oh, thank you for taking my call. I really appreciate your show. I've been listening about 2-3 years at least now. But I've been listening to Pacifica for over 30 years. And I just have to say, I know it may not fall exactly within the lines of what your question is today, because I didn't really hear it straight out, but I've been listening to everyone's comments. I just know that to some extent, we wouldn't be here talking on this network and listening without the formation of Pacifica over the last 70 years and functioning of Pacifica. So it's all connected. And I just wanted to say that although I appreciate everyone's voices who do come on to share their points of view with you on this show and other shows on PRN, there's some new voices that I enjoyed hearing today, because it seems like there's about 6 or 10 regulars out of about 25 or 30 people that are the main pool of listeners that actually get on the air. So it's nice to hear newer voices, especially women's voices too. Anyway, we're in such a dire strait, not only with the topic of what's going on with police brutality and Black Lives Matter, et cetera, but with the network of Pacifica, we're in deep trouble. And I just want to encourage people to use whatever means are possible through social media, through Twitter, through any kind of networking that you can do, to encourage people to support Pacifica, even if it's only like $20 a year or something like that, because we're possibly within weeks away of shutting down one or more stations in Pacifica. And
yes, we
something not to be lost. We need a few $1 million to save Pacifica would be all it takes, and that's nothing in the big scheme of things. But if we don't have 100,000 listeners in LA that are putting up like $10 a month or something, it's just not going to. It's not going to ever work out.
Well,
It's going to go down the
it is a
tubes.
complicated situation, which I know quite well, and it's not going to be solved by getting more listeners. It's that there are internal problems that have besieged the network for many, many years and still have not been solved. But we're out of time. I thank you so much for calling in and closing out our program today. Please call back again and stretch out a little bit more on the points that you're making. Thank you, everyone, for calling in today and contributing. This is the only way we can get, a move on, by restructuring our thinking. Our thinking is stinking. That's the problem. Stinking thinking. And we have to somehow get things straight in our heads. It's vital because it's the only way we will survive. Our thinking is not good. We got to do something there. I thank you all for calling in and so generously sharing your points of view, and bravely too. I like that. So we'll see each other tomorrow. Bye-bye.